Please join us in welcoming the Director General of TURESPAña, Miguel Sanz Castedo, and the CEO of Atout France, Caroline Leboucher, in discussion with Skift Global Tourism reporter Lebawit Girma.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to Caroline and Miguel. Thank you so much for being here. I want to remind our audience to submit questions for our two incredible destinations here. Top two most visited countries pre-COVID, if you didn't know. France with 90 million visitors a year and Spain with 85 million visitors. So I want to start off with getting your reaction to a statement that was made in the press by the Secretary General of the United World Tourism Organization, who said, Europe is now a dangerous destination and consumers want to rest and look for safe places. What do you think about that? I mean, what's your assessment?
Well, Europe is a big continent, for a start. And I think Europe is a safe destination and we have a tragedy in the continent that we thought it would never happen again, which is a war in the eastern flank of our continent, which is a tragedy, as I said. But Spain and France, we're 4 hours away by plane, more than 4,000 kilometers. We're a perfectly safe destination for business coming up, summer season and any other season. So I think that it is a terrible situation, but it doesn't affect to the safety of Spain as a destination, for example.
I want to ask you what you're seeing right now, since we're talking about that. What are you seeing for your Easter and summer seasons? Are you seeing Americans shying away, or are you still on your steady path to recovery? That I know you've been pretty steady in recovering your tourism industry and projecting about 50% recovery this year. Has that changed, Caroline?
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to express, of course, my support to the Ukrainian people in that dreadful international situation. I think the travel industry is very supportive, of course, of the Ukrainian people, supporting the refugees. That's very important. As the industry did during the COVID pandemic, and they are still doing it. I think that Sébastien Bazin will probably dwell upon that, because he does have running hotels in Kyiv right now. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Second, as the ETC, we are both members of the ETC, stated it, the travel industry is real purpose is understanding, bringing positive emotions to customers, and I think that's a very important purpose, even more important in that international situation, and I think that we should definitely keep that in mind and go on. And when we look at bookings and when we look at consumer confidence and sentiment, what we see is that there was this shock 1 month ago, but thanks to the travel TOs, the tour operators, giving information. As Miguel said, we're 3 or 4 hours away from Kyiv. So giving information was paramount for American travelers. So now what we see is that after a short slowdown, now bookings are taking up again. So I think that for the time being, at least, of course, we must be cautious, but for the time being, for Easter, spring holidays, as well as this summer holidays, everything is still on track.
That's great. And it's the same for Spain, right? You've seen...
Yes, I do think you have to look at the short term on the longer, medium and longer term.
Okay.
In the short term, I think there are positive and negative insights. On the negative side, there is a terrible war in the eastern part of Europe that might hold back cautious American tourists and travelers. That is also disrupting even more travelers from Asia, China, Japan, and other parts of Southeast Asia, travel from those places to Europe is being disrupted even more than the pandemic. So these markets might be, we are a bit cautious. For the Spanish destination, for Spain as a destination, Latin America is working fantastically. Connectivity is almost at 2019 levels for the whole of the region, but up in Mexico or Colombia towards Spain. Short-haul flights and visitors, it depends. In British holiday makers are returning to spend their holidays abroad for the first time in 2 years. So the pent-up demand is very high. Okay. Same with France or Italy, Germany, which are our biggest markets.
Right.
This is for this summer and this spring. There is also a positive side that there is, as we heard this morning, these people have savings from the pandemic. So you know, price sensitivity, it's not as high as it used to be. In the longer term, we have inflation, which is going to dent up consumer money.
Right. You bring up the long term, and you know, there've been 2 years of pandemic, and now this tragedy in Eastern Europe, a war, and I believe yesterday the European Travel Commission gave their assessment and was saying that obviously the recovery has slowed a little bit for Europe as a region compared to the rest of the world. But what do you think of the long-term outlook in terms of repositioning Europe as a top tourism destination? Is that, you know, how much of a concern is that?
Well, we are very concerned, and at DTC, at least Spain and France as well, we're advocates of we need to reposition and reinforce Europe's image as the world leading destination, especially in our long haul markets, Americas, Asia. We've suffered during the pandemic. We are suffering now with the war in Ukraine, and we need to first regain and retain confidence from our travelers, but we also need to reinforce brand Europe. And I think this is important. It's something that we do at ETC, and it's something that I think we need to work on.
And that's something the French presidency of EU as well called upon. And because last year alone, I think that European markets accounted for something like 85% of international visitors within Europe. So I think that it will probably be the case this year again. So we should definitely work upon keeping that because that's very important for resilience.
Right.
And at the same time working on long-haul markets, as you mentioned, Miguel, especially the United States, for instance, or South America, because they're very important markets. Regarding Asian markets, unfortunately, we know that China is still closed and probably will be closed until next year. Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Thailand are slowly recovering, or India is slowly recovering, but they might be impacted after the pandemic by this international situation again. So,
before we will get to how you're going to reposition yourselves in a little while. But first, I wanted to talk about the National Tourism Office, right? Both of you run offices that have been around for a very long time, but have evolved also, obviously, since the crisis. Miguel, you came from Madrid Tourism Office, so from a city to a national tourism office. You know, how are you managing overseeing an entire territory's tourism industry versus from where you came from, which is a city? Which one was more dynamic?
Well, since I became TURESPAña's CEO, we had a pandemic, a volcanic eruption, a war. So it's it's been busy. No, it's been busy. But what I could say is that when you're overlooking a city or a destination as a city or a region, you're very much into the destination, into the terroir, the territory. You know the businesses, the actual businesses. Here you're overlooking the people who manage those destinations. And there is a much bigger need for coordination, for leadership, for research and knowledge, for international capabilities. So we have 33 offices around the world, and Spanish destinations rely on those offices and on TURESPAña to do their marketing abroad. So I think here is it's a coordinating effort and leadership rather than managing the destination as such.
Itself, interesting. Caroline, I know you come from a foreign direct investment background and experience and been running Atout France. What are some of the changes that you've seen, in terms of Atout France growing into more of a management role as well?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I come from the FDI world. I'm not a tourist expert as Miguel, but I can see some links between that FDI and competitiveness issue and attractiveness and tourism industry that we're trying to sell to attract international visitors. And I can see two common points there. The art of living, because the French art of living was one of the aspects that we would talk about together with international investors. Because when you talk about investing somewhere, of course, you talk about your workforce and you want them to be happy. So the art of living is important. So that's important for tourism as well. And the second common point is about tech. Because well, you may know or not know, but France is a tech power as well, not only a tourist destination, but also a tech power with 26 unicorns. And 10 billion euros raised last year by French startups. So I used to talk about French tech to investors, and now I like to talk with French startups to see how we can improve the French travel industry's competitiveness thanks to tech.
Interesting. Okay. So talking about repositioning yourselves as number one, number two, and maybe that will shift. We'll see. But let's look at your marketing strategies. Miguel, you have a new model that you call co-marketing model that is collaborative with your regional DMOs. Can you explain how that works and how far that's come so far?
Yes, what we've developed is in this sense of TURESPAña's role into the governance of Spain as a tourist destination, which is leadership and coordination. So what we have done, it's instead of having us doing an advertising campaign in any given market, and then our destinations doing their advertising campaigns in any given market, we've talked to them beforehand, and we've reached consensus about where is best to advertise. Who are the best partners. We've offered knowledge, research, and leadership, and say, okay, instead of doing, Spain has 17 regions, instead of doing 18 campaigns, TURESPAña plus the 17 regions campaigns, let's go together. Let's put our resources together. Let's coordinate our efforts. Let's talk with a bigger leverage to our partners, Expedia or Booking or TripAdvisor. Let's make a coordinated effort and a coordinated strategy to position, reposition, and capture new customers to Spain.
Interesting. So this is kind of a strategy to spread out maybe the visitors as well? Or?
Well, it's a strategy. We have several strategies with this new model. One is to retain customers, to say to our previous visitors, hey, come back to Spain. Spain is open, is fun as always, and it's a thriving destination. And other campaigns that we do to capture and to acquire new customers for mainland Spain, nature tourism, more in the sustainability that we'll talk about later if you like. So it's a model that it's more a model not where to go, but how to do things.
Okay. It's a rethinking the way you...
And our position, and I think this is a way of repositioning the role of the National Tourist Office within the governance of the destination with the private and the public sector.
Okay. Caroline, I know that France has just launched a new campaign, I think just two days ago.
Yeah, exactly.
So we actually do have a video of it. If we could play that roll. Explore France, right? So the focus is on nature. You want to tell us what the concept was?
The focus is on being happy together with your friends, with your family, being happy to just be there, you know, and relax. And so go back to the fundamentals, really, of what vacation should be. Of course, it's about the art of living. Of course, it's about gastronomy. It's about culture, nature. But it's mostly about, you know, just relaxing. And that's exactly what the consumer sentiment is about, especially after 2 years of pandemic and after the shock of this war in Ukraine. People want to just relax, and that's what we wanted to share with the audience. And talking about our marketing strategy, so we've had this policy of co-marketing with regions and private operators for years, but because of the pandemic, we've been discussing with all French regions, so meaning 13 of them in metropolitan France. And for the first time ever last year, we managed to launch a unique campaign on 10 European markets. And so this is the second edition, which is co-invested, but also co-marketed. And we really built it entirely together. So that means a new role, really, for, as you mentioned, Miguel, for a national tourist office.
But domestic tourism has really saved France, right, during the first year of the pandemic and until the recovery started, and I'm sure that was the same for Spain as well. And I'd love to get your take on how much of that are you now going to push? I mean, is that going to be now a bigger push than before because of everything that's happening? Or where do you see that fitting in the bigger picture of international recovery too?
Domestic tourism.
Domestic, yeah.
Well, domestic tourism has been the lifeline of the industry in these last 2 years. But I think big destinations as Spain and France, we cannot live only on domestic tourism. Our industry is too big to live only on domestic tourism. So, and for us, really, domestic tourism is European tourism. Is it more domestic, coming from Toulouse to Catalonia, to the shores of Catalonia, than anyone going from Cadiz, which is farther away, to Catalonia? It's domestic tourism in Europe. The idea of domestic tourism has diluted. We've seen that the speed of recovery within the European Union and the Schengen countries has been much more faster than third countries, including the UK, to Spain and France and many European countries. So I think that domestic tourism has worked really well. It was a lifeline to the industry in Spain. It's still stronger in many cases than it was in 2019. But we cannot say, okay, this is it. This is how are we going to live from now on. Our industry is too big and too important just to rely on domestic tourism.
Right. Caroline?
Yeah, with a lifting of travel restrictions, I think that people were so frustrated, that they couldn't travel abroad. But now they can, so they want to travel abroad. That's what we see in the data that we are checking on a weekly basis. And I think that Europeans, for instance, including Spanish and Italian customers, want to travel abroad again. So that's very good news. And we shall be very happy to see our British friends again in France this summer.
I think that people want to go back to their favorite destinations.
Okay.
We have repeat share. 50% of our visitors have been to Spain more than 10 times. So they they want to go back to their favorite place. They just don't think if it's abroad or is it a border away or is it in their domestic country. They want to go to Mallorca or they want to go to Costa del Sol or they want to go to Madrid or Paris. They want to go to their favorite destinations and that's what they are doing, I think.
Interesting. Yes. Including Americans.
Including Americans.
So let's look at sustainability, which is obviously at the forefront now. France has a new plan, right?
A recovery plan and transformation plan.
Yes, and part of that is tourism and sustainability. Spain also has I think it's an 8-year plan, right? I'd love to hear from your plan the part about spreading the visitation, because or spreading the ecosystem, right? So the website the platform you've created called Atout, which means surroundings, right? Could you tell us about that and
yeah, sure.
how that came about?
Yes, so Atout was created a little more than 1 year ago. It's an app, a system that connects hotels, for instance, or OTAs with experiences, because we believe that if you want to spread tourist flows, if you want tourists to have longer stays, then they should know more about the kind of local experiences that you have to offer. So that's a B2B2C app that should give the opportunity really for all travelers to have better experiences.
Miguel, I know you've talked about this before, that Spain is really not claiming to be the top most sustainable destination, because it's very important to you to show your effort and not just say that you're doing it. And what I want to ask you is, what do you think tourism offices can do to bridge the gap between what the consumer wants and what is available, and what are you doing at TURESPAña to address that?
I think what is really important is that when we talk about sustainability and sustainable destinations, when someone says to me a sustainable destination, I think of Costa Rica, because they have preserved nature and so on. But most people that travel in Europe and they come to Spain or they go to France or Italy, they travel to a coastal resort or to a big city, but they're also worried about sustainability, and they need to know, or they need to, to appreciate that the impact of their travel, it's being considered, and that, all the value chain is considering about how to make that impact lower, and how to make travel more sustainable. So what Spain is doing is, for once, we are investing a record 3.4 billion euros into the transformation of the destination, of the tourism model of Spain, out of the Recovery Fund of the European Union, out of which almost 2 billion are for sustainability projects. That means anything from, changing the windows of hotels in Spain to make them more energy efficient. Okay. That goes to, have electric car chargers at hotels or train stations, or renewing the rental car fleet. It's how to make your travel more sustainable, because we saw a slide this morning saying that only 4% did paid more, but the problem is that regulation is coming. Now there is a big discussion about aviation fuel taxation, and that is going to shape the future of traveling in Europe more than anything else probably. So we need to also let our visitors know how can they travel more sustainably. If they stay longer, sometimes it's going to, change the model in which we operate now. Is maybe you don't have to travel 7 times a year. you need to travel for, but you can stay for longer.
Right.
And you can visit different destinations within your, your fewer travels. And we need to start talking to the consumer in those terms, because now is come as much as you can. Make as many trips.
It's still the same.
And we are changing that. It's not come as many times as you can, maybe. It's when you come, have a fulfilling, trip, be conscious, or if you want to be conscious, but it's doing this journey with our visitors. It's trying to, accommodate all these sustainable trends that are coming to how people travel in household. And I finished with this. Is now, I was telling my family a few days ago, we have 3 different garbage bins at home. 20 years ago, that would be crazy. And now it's normal.
Yeah.
And, it was a process to do that.
Right.
And so we need to do the same processes in all of our lives. And traveling is part of our life.
I feel like we talk often about environmental sustainability, but the social side of it also is becoming more and more crucial. And Caroline, I know you have a workforce campaign going on.
Yes,
I don't know if it's already launched.
Summer.
Oh, it's starting this summer.
Starting this summer, it's part of that recovery and transformation plan. It's a 2 billion euros plan on the whole, and investing in sustainability, of course, will be a big part of it. And yes, as mentioned, it's not only about environmental impact, but also about social impact. Before the pandemic, we used to talk about over-tourism, about how inhabitants and travelers could get on together. That's still an issue. Of course, we don't hear about over-tourism anymore, but it might come back. And I think that it's right now the time to prepare for that and make sure that when we open a new hotel, for instance, it's both catered for travelers' needs, but also for inhabitant needs, because that's very important. And after all, that's what traveling is all about, meeting and understanding other cultures and people. So that's very important. And regarding the workforce, I think that in Spain you do have some shortages as well, problems to recruit after that pandemic. So that's why we decided that we should do something about it, not only promoting the sector, the industry, recalling the purpose of that industry, as I mentioned, very positive purposes, but also working on the working conditions. That's very important, and training as well.
So it's going to be 1 week every year. You're going to have this workforce recruitment.
Well, it will be on a long run.
Long term.
Long term.
And I think we need to remember that tourism is a force for good. In the 1970s, 80s, 2000s, Spanish economy, developed in part thanks to the tourism industry, to the travel industry. Now we need to keep saying, okay, tourism can transform and for good your country. It can give opportunities to those who are in less developed areas of your destination. Can be a way of maintaining traditions, culture, diversity. So, and I think that's a very important message that we have to give.
It's a message that I feel has been lost, really, with all the negativity and it started with the over-tourism and then
positive emotions,
pandemic
about culture, heritage, understanding, peace, as already mentioned. So I think we should all be very proud to be working for that industry, really. And now, of course, if it's more sustainable, it's even better.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, both. And we look forward to following your progress and all the best for the summer as well.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Lily.
Thanks, everybody.